Stop the Badges weekly nightly news. I'm Porter Vaughn. Welcome to Stop the Badges weekly nightly news. I'm Porter Vaughn, and today is Wednesday, December 3rd. I've been sick the past few days, but there's been a lot going on. The police have just been running rampant, and I think it was Saturday when Officer Darren Wilson resigned. And the big thing that the media was pushing was that he wasn't going to receive any severance pay. There was no severance package. And that's true, because the severance package you get when you get fired, he resigned, he quit. It was a deal he struck, and they didn't mention any details, of any package that he received, because they're trying not to mention it. They told us 2 weeks ago he was in negotiations to resign with a huge settlement package, and I've seen nothing reported about his settlement package. Only that they're emphasizing the fact that he is not qualified for severance pay, which he's not, because he resigned, he quit, he terminated his own commission. He wasn't fired. He wasn't severed from the company as it was. He walked away as it was agreed. And he's trying to paint himself like a saint, like he wanted to do this, and make sure that it didn't influence the grand jury's decision. But it was almost like he continued to hide behind the badge and collect over $12,000 in, paid leave, while he was just on administrative leave, but still paid, for 4 months, and he's getting roughly $3,000 a month. Actually more than that. He's getting, I think it was like $4,500 a year, so he's getting like $3,700 a month or some shit. But, or $45,000 a year, so about $3,700 a month. That's him with his deal, and he hid behind the badge. He shot an unarmed man, Michael Brown, one of the members of the community he's supposed to be protecting, and then moved on and resigned and walked away, wiped his hands completely clean of the situation. Now, as far as today, the grand jury decision has come back in New York, from last July. Eric Garner, the man who was chokeholded out by the police officers because his crime was selling loose cigarettes on the side of the street. And I guess he was making a kind of a free market career out of when you give a friend a cigarette and they reimburse you the 25, 50 cents for a couple cigarettes. But that was what he chose to do, for money. And apparently that was illegal, which is terrible that we try to police and regulate individuals like this. But we do. So the police naturally went to engage him for his petty crime, and ended up choking him out and putting him in a chokehold, one officer did, and killed him. The autopsy, the coroner ruled it a murder, a homicide, and the grand jury was, sent to investigate and gather witness testimony and review all the evidence. And of course they naturally decided not to indict the officer. And now the news is trying to paint the picture that the important details are that he was a heavy-set man with a breathing problem, and he was a big guy and overweight, heart problems. It almost as if the officer wasn't at fault. It was his own system. It just shut down. First off, a chokehold is completely unnecessary. You're trying to take a man for selling cigarettes. That's ridiculous. And second, if you aren't an officer who's trained to, properly restrain and arrest someone without killing them or running the risk of killing them, which is why shit like rubber bullets, gas canisters, tasers, bobcats, all the crazy warfare machinery they use on us, that just, even the tasers electrocute us, fry our brains, make us fall down, bump our head open. The gas canisters fly into us, burn the side of a baby's face right off. Rubber bullets, that could kill you. if you had a chest problem, a breathing problem, a heart problem, if you were obese, which most of the country is. So, and that's an instance you could say, in which you could say it's more likely than not that a rubber bullet could do severe damage to you. Because more than 50% of the population is obese, more than 50% of the population has health problems, more than 50% of the population, isn't used to being bombarded with rubber bullets, so that's going to be a serious thing for them. And then if it hits them in a sensitive area, obviously even more so. But he wasn't indicted in New York, they're just letting him walk, same thing, no indictment, grand jury says let it go, he's a cop, he was on duty, he must have been doing the right thing. Officers need to be held responsible for this shit. And then last night, here locally in Arizona, we had a 34-year-old killed, suspected drug dealer. Police were just coincidentally in the area on an unrelated call. They got a report from a resident in the apartment complex that a drug transaction was going on in the area in the parking lot. Which, individual liberties, civil liberties and all, if it's chemicals you're putting into your body, I don't see why we're trying to police each other like, I drink beer, but it's legal right now. His thing isn't, so why don't we just all call the cops on him? Why don't we fuck up his life? Because we're that judgmental. Why don't we just call the cops on gay people? Why don't we call the cops on blacks? Why don't we just take it back to the 1930s and act like we haven't grown at all? There's a black lesbian drug addict out after 9 o'clock at night, the sun's down, it's sketchy. Call the police. Have them beat them, properly cite them, and send them on their way. Or just arrest them and have them dry out in the tank. But, I don't know. So, police go to investigate, harass the individuals in the vehicle. I guess upon approaching the individuals, the driver, the man who's later executed, he gets out and, as the officer says, goes to put something in the back. It's not really a crime, If the officer even says you're putting something in the car rather than taking a weapon out, that's kind of better. Because, really, as an officer, maybe he's taking a weapon out. Or even if he's trying to stash drugs, I know where it's going, I can separate it from it and then investigate. That's better. So the officer says he's putting something back and calls for his hands. At which point, the guy takes off. I guess put his hands in his pocket first, the officer says, and then the officer draws his weapon. So the guy runs, he's unarmed, he takes off, cop chases him down, falls him into an apartment, into somebody's house, and then is fighting with him, and I guess tells him to keep his hands in his pocket because he thinks he feels a gun. A gun which later turns out to be a pill bottle, and I don't know, but if you have something like the size of a pack of cigarettes or a pill bottle, and the officer feels that, I would think like a pill bottle, it's this big around, you're automatically going to know that's not a gun. It's so small, it's right there, it's localized. You're going to know it's not a gun if you have any training at all. But the officer then uses this as justification and his continued resistance to be subject to a completely unlawful search and detainment, because I'm sorry, but somebody else saying they think there's a drug transaction going on based on what evidence? And their testimony is not, which is, an officer should not even be considered admissible really, but it's not considered evidence. So you can't really investigate and harass these people based upon that. Anyways, he uses this as justification when the guy refuses to take his hands out of his pocket, or keep his hands in his pocket at this point. He shoots him twice in the torso. I don't know if he was in the gut or the back, but since they were struggling, I'm thinking maybe he was behind him, on top of him, and shot him in the back. But as more details come out, we'll know more. But this all stems back to the point where police are putting their liberties aside to keep us safe, which is why they don't need to needlessly harass people unless they're really worried, which I don't think. They later found in his vehicle marijuana and a handgun. So he was unarmed, but the gun was in the car, which maybe he was putting it up. so that the officer wouldn't have justification to shoot him. Maybe he was putting his gun up. And a bag of marijuana. They didn't explain what quantity. They just said marijuana. But either one of those, protecting yourself, marijuana, I don't think that's a reason to get shot to death by a cop. Somebody who's putting their liberties aside, somebody who shouldn't be harassing people needlessly, who, if you're investigating something, it's really when you suspect, and it's more likely than not, that there's something wrong, that that person is committing a serious offense, that you need to be there policing them for the safety and well-being of the public, then you step in. But even then, your rights are aside, because you're protecting others' rights. And even so, until there's proof that he's doing something wrong, you're protecting the suspect's rights as well. That's your fucking job. Do it right. Stop killing us. So until that man actually pulls out a gun and at the very least points it at you, but really I would say fires off a round in your direction, or wings you, or hits you, or your partner, or executes one of you, then at that point you have the right to use lethal force. But not before then. Not when you fear that there's a gun. Not when you think that he may get your gun. Not when you're afraid that you might get beat up, and then he might get your gun, and then he might kill you 4 steps down the road. Not because you're a little bitch hiding behind the badge who just want to harass people and be a bully. But hopefully this guy gets indicted, because nobody else is. And we don't know what's going to happen with the officers who shot the 12-year-old in Cleveland last week, but we'll find out. I'm going to guess because he had an airsoft pistol, even though they shot him real quick, I'm going to guess that they're not going to get indicted. But that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Stay informed and spread the word. And have a good one.